So this is a huge win for Mortal Kombat 11 on the Nintendo Switch, if this is actually true. Now recently in the Game Informer's magazine, Game Informer themselves actually did an interview with the co-producer of Mortal Kombat 11, and they pretty much asked him, how is the Switch version actually going to run? Is it going to be running somewhere close to 60 frames per second? And basically what the co-producer of Mortal Kombat 11 straight out said, he said yes, it's going to be hitting 60 frames per second, and that is a very big win for the Nintendo Switch version of the game. Now, we don't really have any concrete proof if this is actually accurate, and we honestly don't know how many times it's going to be hitting 60 frames per second, and is it actually going to be hitting 60 frames per second a lot, or is it going to be close to the 60 frames per second mark? Either way, if this pans out to be true, this is a massive win for Mortal Kombat 11 on the Nintendo Switch, because so many times, so many ports come to the Nintendo Switch, whether they're modern day ports or whether they're old ports or whatever the case may be, and a lot of times they're gimped versions of a pre-existing game, and a lot of times the resolution is terrible or the frame rate is terrible. You have to compromise either in the graphic fidelity or the frame rate of the game, and in this situation with Mortal Kombat 11, graphics aren't as important as frame rate, so if they can get somewhere near 60 frames per second most of the time with the Switch version of Mortal Kombat 11, that will make people maybe potentially want to buy this game, and this is a win-win scenario for the developer and a win-win scenario for Nintendo itself, because that means copies will be sold. Does that mean we're going to be getting 60 frames per second gameplay and like 1080p flawless gameplay? Most likely, in my opinion, I don't think we're at this point with the Nintendo Switch's hardware with a game like Mortal Kombat 11 where we would be getting a solid frame rate like 60 frames per second, and on top of that we would be getting 1080p performance. I just don't think that's the case. I think we're going to have to make a compromise somewhere, but if they can get the full fat version of Mortal Kombat 11 on the Switch, meaning we got all the same game modes we have with all the other versions of the game, and on top of that it runs at 60 frames per second, even if the graphics were like 900p, 800p, game would still look pretty good, then I think a lot of people would be happy, and it would be phenomenal. We would have a portable version of Mortal Kombat 11 on the go, and that's really the biggest thing we have to look forward to. It really does depend on that frame rate, if you ask me personally, because I think frame rate with games like fighting games in general, they really need as much frame rate as you can give the game. So if you can hit 60 frames per second most of the time, or even if you can get close to 60 frames per second most of the time, I think Switch owners will be happy with the port. Will it be the best version of Mortal Kombat 11 if this is true, if it can hit 60 frames per second? Most likely no, it's still not going to be the best version of Mortal Kombat 11. You're going to have to sacrifice something, like I said, most likely graphics, and since the Nintendo Switch is not that powerful compared to an Xbox One or a PS4, of course, the best place to play it is not going to be the Nintendo Switch, but the main reason you would be picking up the Nintendo Switch version in the first place is maybe you only have a Nintendo Switch, or maybe you want to play the game on the go. And for the developer to flat out come out and say that this game is going to be running at close to 60 frames per second or hitting 60 frames per second a lot of the time is just a very big, huge win for the Nintendo Switch. And this is one time I'm actually glad that it looks like they're actually working everything out. Usually when it comes to ports of games, for me personally, I'm okay if the devs want to delay a game, maybe even 6 to a year down the road for a game to come out, if that means the game's going to play much more better on Nintendo hardware, because like I said, a lot of the times it really does feel like Nintendo Switch owners are getting gypped when it comes to games. You may remember the very disastrous port of WWE, I think 2018 or 2017. You guys remember that game? That game ran at like 1 frame per second. That game was absolute disaster, and I'm sure the Switch can definitely handle a much more better game. They just got super lazy and they didn't give a rat's ass about the game. They definitely should have delayed the game even longer. I know fans really wanted that WWE game on the Nintendo Switch. I honestly don't understand why they didn't delay it even more. I know it was already delayed in the first place and it didn't come out around the time the other versions of the game came out, but they definitely should have waited at least maybe another 6 months for that game, and I'm sure you would have had an amazing port. And then we have things like, for instance, like the FIFA games. The FIFA games play okay in terms of performance, but the problem with those games is they're actually missing a lot of features that you don't get in other versions of FIFA. So it's really going to matter when Mortal Kombat 11 comes to the Nintendo Switch, how well the game runs in terms of performance and what type of features we're getting on the Nintendo Switch. But overall, it definitely looks like Mortal Kombat 11 on the Nintendo Switch is going to be an fantastic port, and it's definitely a game you're probably going to want to pick up if you're a Nintendo Switch fan. It looks like it's in the makings to be one of the best ports on the Nintendo Switch. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News, signing out.